sponsored by the Degama Group.
Welcome to Rumbo Minero, Miguel. How are you?
Hi, Jorge.
Well, we have a program always focusing on the topic of legal mining, but watch out, because we are now inviting now Juan Carlos Liendo, the previous leader of the National Intelligence Directorate and a political analyst, to engage in a discussion about this matter, and also to Alberto Farfán, an expert in mining disputes. There is an issue to discuss here that it's quite important, isn't it? On one hand, it's said that legal mining reached $5,000 million. On the flip side, illegal mining has allegedly crossed the $10 billion mark for the first time, meaning it is no longer a trivial concern. No?
We must see these cases separately, right? The mining formalization is one part, like the fight against illegal mining, right?
Yes, I truly believe that these two individuals will definitely offer us some ideas to consider for. I hope the government listens in order for it to be truly, considering that they also come from CA, the political campaign that destroys mining, as we always say, do not disrespect formal mining. But there will be a lot of money in illegal mining during this campaign, and that's what we need to discuss with them. So, well, we have an exciting and quite intriguing program lined up for what is about to unfold. Now, let's pass it over to Gabriela Chicoma for the main mining news.
Thank you, Jorge. These are the main mining news of the week. Maximo Rodolfo Galo Quintana has been appointed as the General Director of the General Directorate of Mining Formalization of the Ministry of Energy and Mines. The official is recognized for his extensive experience in social management, conflict resolution, and institutional strengthening. He takes on this challenge with the aim of advancing the inclusion of informal miners into the legal framework. Break time 0.9. Representing the Peruvian government, the Minister of Energy and Mines, Jorge Montero, participated in the Future Minerals Forum 2025, which took place from January 14th to 16th of this year in the city of Riyadh, the capital of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, an important annual international forum focused on the mining and minerals industry. Break time, achieving significant foundational agreements on petrochemicals, exploration and exploitation of natural gas, metallurgy and exploitation of strategic minerals, oil business, development of renewable energies, and desalination of seawater for the mining industry.
Thank you very much to Gabriela Chicoma for the main mining news of the week. We are now joined by Juan Carlos Liendo, former head of the National Directorate, as a political analyst with expertise in intelligence. We have brought you to Rumbo Minero to discuss the topics of La Libertad, illegal mining, and the state of citizen security. In fact, the issue is already getting out of hand. Juan Carlos, welcome to Rumbo Minero.
Thanks for the invite. I'm glad to be here.
We were already talking. At first it was said that factions of drug trafficking were entering illegal mining. Factions of common criminals, Tren de Aragua. Some of these groups were getting involved in illegal mining. And now we are starting to observe, and you, being a knowledgeable man in the field of national intelligence, and now we are starting to see that once inside this illegal mining, I would divide it into those who want and those who don't want, as there is already quite a strong criminal presence there. They are starting to become terrorist acts. The grenades are beginning, the strong threats are starting, and how do you see the path towards this? You being a man who has been the head of from the National Intelligence Directorate and a political analyst, because we could be on the way to something very, very tragic, right?
Yes, and much worse, let's say, than what we know. This is a process, as you have rightly mentioned. Well, before we used to talk, we knew each other, and also us in the work team that I have. The future projection is already happening and is arriving now, which means it has already been put in place. Isn't it? Well, it was difficult to envision what lay ahead in those days, but the prediction was that crime would establish itself. And it was in progress. So there are two things now. The crime is already here, and another projection is coming. Indeed, the indicators are right there and very clear to see. Two things need to be highlighted. While the process was being warned about, nothing was done, and what was done failed. Today, we have entered a new stage that is evolving and in the process of consolidating. Previously, it was the admission process. Today is about consolidation. And what is coming is the establishment of criminal power. That's what's coming. Example. It was 2 days ago. To see how the dimension has changed. Because the phenomenon we are witnessing right now is new. It is new. So we must be attentive to see what is new and interpret it. No? Well, let's see. Until a few years ago, if we talked about the guerrilla movement, the FARC, allied with drug trafficking, it was quite clear. The day before yesterday, two factions of the FARC, they shot at one another and a notable death occurred. There was a clash between gangs, listen to what I'm saying, amidst criminal factions, and the considerable amount of fatalities and disorder they have inflicted has forced the Colombian government to declare a national emergency. Haven't you? Well, the opponents also rightly say to the Colombian government, you have let this pass. To create the chaotic situation, look at what's happening and take extreme measures at the cost of the population's fear. Watch the movie. In Peru, the same movie is being replicated with particularities, and we go to Patas.
But the money comes from illegal sources. Add that amount of cash there. Yes.
It relates to illegal mining, which is against the law. Let's see if I have one foot in the law and the other out. I'm also outside the law. I mean, there's that, right? So, and this has also been reported internationally as of last week. In the absence of the state, you have illegal money, don't you? Who implements it? Who instrumentalizes it? Let's say if I do illegal things, I might do it, you see, right? But if there's no control over such a powerful and large activity, what's happening with the projection of what we discussed last year? Crime has taken over. It has already occupied the space that's being left. The political power. Since there is an absence of political power, crime has taken its place. Well, look at the paradox. My illegality of informality. See how I remain informal and there is no state. Then crime captures me. Look at the bad deal the informal makes. I mean, if I am the living informal, I already make money. And now I have the criminal's rifle at my neck. Because there is no state. Yes, that's what's going on. Crime is already firmly established in this area. No, it is already set up in a consolidation phase that demands a prerequisite, which I will bring up at the end of this explanation. The consolidation process is now in motion because the crime has been set up. Where? In northern Peru. Regarding illegal mining in northern Peru, in Amazonas, throughout the Condor mountain range, Bagua, where the local Aguaruna people reside. In Patas, in Puno, around Rinconada, and in Madre de Dios. 4 main crime hotspots, not to mention others. But these are definitely tied to illegal mining. And I conclude this process of consolidation. It has a goal that is not, which is a criminal objective, but not an economic objective. It is a political objective. Just as it happens in Colombia, as it happens in Mexico. Crime says, I am the political power. And their first message, a non-destructive deflagration bomb, because they also regulate their deterrence. They say, okay, the prosecutor's office, nor does he mess with me. But later, they will control it or they will already dominate it. No, this process of installation and consolidation will find its end point in the elections. B, when the electoral process reflects the power of organized crime that holds a rifle over informal miners in the absence of the state and will achieve political objectives. That is
I wanted to get to that point. Juan Carlos, well, the head of the OMPI has indicated that the elections in 2026 could be quite violent, right? Due to the pressure that some candidates may face from groups, right? such as illegal mining and drug trafficking, about illegal tree cutting? How do you see the pre-electoral landscape for 2026? Given that this Congress has certain representatives connected to illegal mining, we are currently observing this with the Energy and Mines Commission of Congress, especially in relation to the Mapilo matter, that we are not sure what the future is going to be. Could it be possible that we have it already out of the blue? Is there an illegal official participating in Congress for the upcoming elections?
The issue is more complex. To clarify, in terms of the approach as we find ourselves in this moment, I would reply to you with a standard interpretation of what the power of illegal mining is similar to that of politicians. That's what we dealt with until last year. Now the situation has changed. What has changed? Yes, the electoral process is going to be a mess over areas. Let's look at the critical areas of Peruvian mining. Let me step back to get organized in the campaigns. In the mining production areas where the largest mining companies are located. And here I am going to be categorical. Absolutely. All political authorities, local governments, and regional governments are left-wing, and they all succeed with an anti-mining discourse. It was like a local logic, almost parochial. In the end, the company came, and with the influx of capital, people settled in. There were conflicts in various places. The mining business community stated, all right, this is just part of the costs involved, and I put up with it. So he shaped his understanding of security. Correct? That was the classic approach. External security company, internal, safe, and security. Because the impact of capital was greater than the socio-political reality. Yes, that has changed. Why has it changed? Because those authorities, policies which over the last 30 years have voted on the left, today they are held by the illegal economy, which is tied to crime. So what was before, let's see, all the mayors, all of them from the main mining concessions, mining operations are leftist. But a leftist ideology of local ideology, but ruled by illegal mining. Now this is the situation, has changed because crime, populism takes control, exerting dominance over political affairs. So if before the mining company had to negotiate, it now opens its social responsibility area to negotiate with the community. You can negotiate with the community. You know this in different ways. Question, can you negotiate with criminals?
No.
There's no way. There's no way. So the big change in the electoral process is that it's going to be bloody, not because of illegal mining, but because of the control that crime is taking over illegal mining as the state has abdicated. Then the crime has adopted it. This changes the entire structure of the positioning of large mining operations in Peru.
Now we have 59 mayors in Peru who are have a rainfall process of, right? Among them, Madre de Dios. Yes. So that also adds fuel to the fire, doesn't it?
It's true. Why? Because there used to be community relationships. You negotiated now and negotiated ideologically. Today, at this moment, you negotiate politically and have people in Congress. You have a mayor. Is that right? But in that political matter, the political element of transnational crime has come into play in the Mexican fashion as well as in the Colombian fashion. So they are no longer. In other words, there will no longer be 59 mayors, but there will be 59, 100 mayors, but no longer for their political interests, but for economic interests due to mining because it is a market issue. Now they will be subject to the rhythm of crime violence. And that absolutely changes the whole panorama for you.
We have 2 minutes remaining. The one who wanted to resolve the issue is the directions we should pursue. The state's presence matters. Hey, we were talking about crews. We were discussing the number of people that need to be present, right? From their desks in Lima. The state's purchase of gold, but checking who they buy it from and what processes are involved. How do you see it?
Yes.
What would you add to this?
The axis, the center of gravity, let's see.
Talking about the solution.
Now, let's discuss the solution, shall we? The solution has to capture the seriousness of the problem and interact accordingly. First of all, this is a national security problem. The required investment amount and legal considerations are simply out of reach for companies. Therefore, companies must coordinate with the state within a national security framework, not within a localized social conflict framework. It's a guilt issue. The solution is around there, right? It's a matter of national security. In this logic, the center of gravity, the key point is the refinement of gold. Because gold is not an illegal product. What is illegal is drug trafficking. So you cannot make a product that is not illegal by nature, like gold, illegal. Basically, gold is the source of all wealth. You cannot make it illegal. Then you have to create the mechanism. This has been studied. The center of gravity is refinement, and the control over the refinement and the seal it places. If I am a miner, informal, illegal, and I am going to interact with the state to have legal gold at a competitive market price, in a market structure, I leave the illegal part aside automatically, but that doesn't exist, since the complete system of political power and security is in disarray, needing a period of transition. Hence, the notion, if the wealth generated by gold must be formalized and should be supported by a national security strategy. This is the key point to grasp. Promote the mining sector. We have had to reach this point. We are still in time because the criminals in place are in the process of consolidation. If the criminals consolidate after the electoral process, it's over.
Agreed. Crystal clear. Very well, Juan Carlos. Thank you for being on Rumbo Minero. We hope to have you here in the coming weeks to talk a bit more about what's coming with the political campaign. Thank you very much. Thanks. Well, that was Juan Carlos Liendo, former head of the National Intelligence Directorate and political analyst, a consultant who also deals with intelligence in the mining field. So we have covered the complete subject of urban safety and the problem of illegal mining in La Libertad. And in general, in the entire strategy against illegal mining and how to combat it, as we were discussing a few minutes ago. Let's go to a commercial break now. We'll be right back. All right, entering the America Mining segment, we are now in our studios with José Gonzáles, a specialist in various mining topics, but he is also the editor for the international magazine Rumbo Minero. Welcome, José. How are you? I wanted a bit of what everyone is talking about, right? That Trump is coming in determined on the first and second day, already signing things. This whole week has been, some people are very worried, others are really excited, and some are feeling quite low. But the issue is, as always, we don't think that Trump or the United States in general is paying much attention to Peru, because it is a country that is still not on the path to development. But there is indeed logistical importance of Peru being a hub. And the other thing is, there is a struggle between China and the United States, and Peru has just inaugurated a very important port. In addition to the topic of copper, gold, and the necessity, you who have followed Trump, what do you think I could do? What are the advantages and disadvantages that Peru could potentially have with this president, Donald Trump?
Unlike his first administration, Jorge, where there was a kind of trial and error during the first months, perhaps the first 2 years, break time 0.6, with legislative achievements limited to tax reform. This is a President Trump who comes very determined and with a very tight agenda. And he emphasizes this point in his opening speech, including the executive orders and proclamations that he signs later that night at the Coliseum in Washington in front of his supporters, and at an impromptu conference at the Global House in the Global Office at the White House. What do we derive and what can affect us? President Trump says this is a golden era for the United States and that the logic of common sense will be imported. The question American analysts are asking is, whose common sense? And the question is, in economic terms, beyond the social and cultural aspects, this notion that the federal state will only recognize two genders, what is it that can affect us? He only specifically mentions two countries in his speech, actually just one, because he implicitly talks about Mexico but directly mentions Panama and the interest in reclaiming the canal. And he doesn't mention that the stock markets have risen in the days following. Yet President Trump's inauguration, because it doesn't mention the issue of tariffs, which is what could affect us emerging countries in general, and Peru in particular. It has been said that the port of Shanghai, being Chinese-owned, could be subject to this.
Being Chinese-owned, it could be subject to different rules than if it were Peruvian, right?
Precisely. Due to the Chinese situation, the president does not refer to tariffs in his address, although he does speak about them. At this unplanned conference, on the same evening of his oath-taking in the Oval Office, he remarks, "I am considering has not decided to increase tariffs on Mexico and Canada on the 1st of February. He then says, because the president has already given a formal conference in 48 hours, 2 informal ones he has declared to the press. We return to the Trump dynamic, which is also considering imposing tariffs on China February 1st. It hasn't occurred yet. He hasn't made a commitment. And it seems there is an ongoing debate among his advisors."
And what he does creates
Correct.
a sort of chaos in relation to what one might expect it to be. Now, one thing is what, in this case, due to his personality, he let slip. And another thing is when they sit at the table to crunch the numbers and say, hey, we have to go this way, because if not, if we want the American dream and start again to be a very, very big and powerful country, don't you think we should aim to be millionaires again?
And he has expressed his desire to meet with President Xi of China within the first 100 days of his new administration, and Xi has responded in a friendly manner. They are trying to extend the attention, and many of the things he has signed, these proclamations and executive orders, are going to face challenges, legal. That is to say, these executive orders already to intervene, freeze, and prevent certain policies in the federal administration, which is the only thing he controls. The employees of the federal government. There are already legal resources against those measures. There are already legal resources against them. About the changes to immigration laws that also have some restrictions, yes. Now, another question, is China really in charge of the Panama Canal? No, the Panama Canal is run by an independent authority. We must remember that President Trump sometimes plays fast and loose with the truth. What China has done is build port infrastructure at the Pacific and Atlantic locks. Why? Because the United States has not built no investment in US infrastructure for decades, thus the port of Shanghai. The United States was the first to be presented with that port, but they did not express any interest in financing it. The syndicate created by Chinese banks to finance it is because China was interested. And again, as we have mentioned in the last one, we are at a stage in the STRIPS policy concerning the new Silk Road, which has recently evolved. So how will Trump's decisions and other decisions that might be made influence us? Because they are his prerogative. Do you remember? Before the end of the year, we talked about how analysts believed that the United States would not leave the Paris agreements. Well, it left the Paris agreements. It left the World Health Organization. He got rid of the incentives, to automobiles and to vehicles that run on electricity. He has declared that wind towers will not be built on federal lands. He has suspended the disbursements of the laws. There could be a global change on these issues if they are consolidated. But 25 states of the Union have just responded to the Paris agreements, stating that regardless of what President Trump decides federally, those states remain in the agreements. Let's remember, the United States is a republic.
Does the United States need Peruvian mining?
Without a doubt. Let's remember there is a discussion within the United States. Copper is a critical mineral, and that decision.
An alliance between the United States and Peru for critical minerals has been signed at APEC.
The Geological Institute, the United States Geological Survey, resists recognizing copper as critical because we are entering new dynamics, as we had mentioned. There should be volatilities in the quotations this year, which we will follow a little more closely this year in the magazine and in our coverage of the topic due to Trump's policies. However, the dynamics will remain because President Trump creating noise at the federal level regarding critical minerals does not mean that the energy transition will stop and everything will continue depending on the growth dynamics in China, where there is indeed a very aggressive evolution in terms of energy transition, and there is a certain recovery in growth. the American economy is growing. Let's remember that there is a midterm election in 2 years in the United States. If President Trump does not achieve effective results, this noise we are witnessing, these sudden changes could disappear.
Changes, agreed. Many thanks to José Gonzáles for being, as always, with us, the international editor of Rumbo Minero magazine. Speaking of Rumbo Minero magazine, if you are a supplier or want to become one, get an annual package of Rumbo Minero magazine by visiting www.rumbominero.com. You can also view the entire magazine virtually for free with all these great reports and such interesting information. Miguel.
It's time to move on to the ANSEC mining assets segment.
Well, Alberto Farfán, a specialist in social conflicts, is already with us. We are going to talk a bit about changes in the General Directorate of Mining Formalization. Welcome. Tell us a little, Alberto, is Máximo Rodolfo Gallo Quintana returning to the General Directorate of Mining Formalization at the Ministry of Energy and Mines, MINEM? The official is recognized for his vast experience, as we know, in social issues. The resolution of conflicts and institutional strengthening takes on this challenge with the aim of advancing inclusion of informal miners into the legal framework. We have talked several times about how to legalize those who want to legalize themselves. What is this new approach of the General Directorate of Mining Formalization at the Ministry of Energy and Mines?
It seems to me that given the person's credentials, they would have the necessary requirements to fulfill a role. The problem is that the role is not in Lima, is in the field, the presence of the state. What is missing is at the place of production. So, although it is led, the presence must be permanent in the area. The big problem has simply been the lack of technical hands that can be alongside the projects and informal mining. Formalizing means working with thousands of people daily. What do you do with 2-3 people in a place like Puno, like Trujillo, like Patas, where you can't even cover a field day? Logistically, that's impossible, so this is a good step. But implementation in the field is vital. And
it's a good idea because truly, around illegal mining, there are countless solutions, at least proposals. But why doesn't the government buy the gold? And by buying the gold, it starts to backtrack and begins to see where the gold comes from and starts to tell them, well, formalize and don't impact the environment. Let's organize you. Instead of the gold going illegally to Bolivia, that also benefits the small miners who are paid little, right?
punishment indeed. This idea that we happily share, because this is an idea that I imagine you might be thinking or everyone thinks, I would put it in context. Why doesn't the Bank of the Nation perform that function? Why isn't it established? Doesn't it buy? Doesn't it formalize the purchase? Because it's not a matter of handing over a mineral in the shadows. You have an ID. That's where formalization begins. Because the projects I imagine, let's now discuss the MAPI law and everything else. There is always room for the dark side, where you have to identify yourself to deliver. That's where the danger gap lies. But if you deliver, if you buy, you have a balance, you work technically, you're already entering the field. The National Bank couldn't buy.
It couldn't buy illegal gold? Obviously. I mean, the National Bank doesn't have the equipment to be able to map where they come from. The National Bank must be given the go-ahead when they are legalized and told to buy.
Buy it and sell it. The filtering is done by someone else, which I imagine is an entity that can work hand in hand with the miner, in fact, that filter. But in the end, I think it's worth it. If they deduct 20 points, if you deduct 4 or 5.
The great opportunity lies in the fact that gold is not cocaine. Of course, clearly, either way, you can't legalize cocaine. So
even though the price today can be close to $90,000 per kilo, we are not necessarily talking about a prohibited product, but At the source, you have to work on legality. I mean, legality is in the field.
A bit like that, right? Now, Alberto, well, already with the failed reinfo, break time. Currently, the Energy and Mines Commission of Congress is working on the regulatory framework of the MAPE law, but some points are coming up in which the National Society of Mining, Petroleum and Energy decided to withdraw from this working group and indicate that informal groups have practically taken over this commission, trying to create a MAPE according to their interests. Well, we also know that this Congress is already too polarized and politicized according to the interests of mining, both informal and illegal in some cases. Do you think that this legislature, this Congress, should no longer address the issue of MAPE, but rather the next Congress that enters in the future?
I think it still has a lot of room. All of the XXV and part of the XXV corresponds to this current congressional representation. I don't believe that the 130 Congress members have a majority tendency to lean towards the informal or the illegal. I think this is part of a group that always has a formation, politics that deals with these things. We're talking about 30, 40 people within that Congress, which has a lot of media capability, a lot of social connections. But I believe that the majority must enforce formality. In other cases, it has worked. So why not in gold? The processes can be very slow. But I think we need to move towards formality. Because the country cannot advance. It cannot be an island. It cannot be the Peru chosen by other countries to use it as a corridor for the informal. Today, that's happening. Informal gold is passing through. It arrives here, and from here, a plane takes off, as I've always said on this program. There is a stretch of formality that is dangerously becoming a habit. So, we have to nip things in the bud, and that involves all entities, including Congress and the government, the executive. I will not tire of invoking that this is a process. It has already worked in other countries. It has worked very well. I always use Chile as an example because it is close at hand, and it also formalized in this way. It also ordered its large companies, at the time Codelco, to buy minerals, develop and formalize. Later it let go, but first it organized them. It's not an invention. These laws are not inventions. They are formalization processes. They can indeed be delayed. They can be influenced today by the dark side. But keep your head up. In the end, the result is the same. Higher taxation, better education, health services, the advantage of formalizing. There are already examples. There are already examples of formalization in gold, which today exports directly to suitable refineries around the world, which are few. There will be 10 major gold refineries, which are the ones paying correctly. They deduct the correct amount. They don't deduct a large amount because it's not shady. You have to enter a market where the value is represented by what the commercial price pays. In other words, it's not something, when I hear that they penalize 20 points, it means there's room for informality. So in the gold trade, you have signals that need to alert that these processes need to change.
Now, the electoral seasons are coming, right? I think that after the summer they start, there are many candidates, but none offer themselves because it seems they have already learned that ideally it's 6 months before and not a year before, right? But in these electoral times that are already in campaign mode, properly speaking, there's always something in common, which is they criticize mining in one way or another. How do you see, first, these 40 parties, and second, the implications of this campaign regarding what the candidates will promise about the mining issue? What's your take on it?
Unfortunately, there's the captor, the dream seller, the one who captures the vote, seeks the pocket where the proposal is developed. There's a tempting variable to opt for people where supposedly you secure the vote. These pockets, throughout Peru, encourage us to enter on the illegal side of informality and extend with the political promise that this will last 100 years and everything will remain the same. It is very tempting. The idea of attracting people who have the liquidity to form a group that serves as your political support to later forgive them, extend the deadlines. I could not dare, from the few formal parties of the 30-something that are in the race, unfortunately encouraged by the electoral law, which has caused the dispersion of parties to lead us to choose between two that have 12 or 13% preference because it is dispersed. The entire electoral body is designed to generate this type of chaos. Those who think differently from us, who are not Democrats, have already caused damage to the system. And in these rules, with these rules of the game, this temptation to develop the illegal or be funded by the illegal is very strong. But that funding of illegality
is quite complicated because the National Jury of Elections, or the OMP, would have to oversee it at the right time, where that money comes from. Now, if they don't declare it and it's in the air, they pay for rallies and pay for things. And while the legal ones do declare, yes, it's complicated.
Yes, because on one hand, the contribution to private companies is formalized, but on the other hand, it opens the path to the dark side. I mean, you have a double message.
All of that is bad.
And you punish the company.
The private company for having, right? So,
Private, indeed. And now?
we are in the hands of what could be a sui generis campaign with a lot of illegal money, right?
Indeed. And that's what is expected. That is not going to change. I think we are already on the verge of what is going to happen now in the middle of the year, because mid-year heats up the political scene. You're already talking. It's an electoral year, pre-electoral. But I believe that in charge of the injustices as our country is, in July, ties begin to break and everyone goes their own way. You will see that soon. That's why whatever happens with internal legislation will be this year. It will be in 25.
It will not wait. So, what you're saying is that legislation is important before the campaign begins. Of course.
Of course, before July. The Permanent Commission is active until the end of March. This can be taken advantage of. The situation pushes you to tighten, to pick up the pace. Don't wait until the end of March when the formal session comes and Congress goes back to its usual business. I wouldn't wait. We should correct and start working from now. You can't wait for April to start with the year's normal Congress schedule.
Thank you very much to Alberto Farfán, a specialist in social conflicts, for being on Rumbo Minero. Thank you all. Well, the Permanent Commission already knows. There's a lot to discuss regarding what's coming with the campaign and what relates to mining, illegal mining, legal mining. It's important to define things once and for all. And on the other hand, it's a shame that society has to withdraw, because in that committee, they're creating a Frankenstein of maybe, right? Honestly, I believe that politicians need to sit down and do things right, despite the pressure that might come from illegal mining. Don't you think? All stakeholders should be involved. The fact that society withdraws is not a good sign that this law will turn out well. Everyone should be present. Everyone has a voice. But the fact that they withdraw means that things are completely out of control. And definitely a commission is formed to ensure that all Peruvians agree with the law. The issue in Peru is reaching consensus, and that is very important. We'll take a commercial break and be right back. Well, as we reach the end of the program, Miguel, I think it's concerning, isn't it? The solutions are there. Liendo tells us, Juan Carlos Liendo tells us, we must not allow crime to consolidate in the mining sector. They are now already in a stage of consolidation. We must not let it consolidate. That means we need to act now. We must call upon the President of the Republic, Dina Boluarte. Truly, the government needs to do more and be much more direct. In this government, it has grown, look, to 14,000 or more than 10,000, at least millions of dollars, generated by illegal mining in 2024, and this is a major alarm. I mean, as you were saying, we could have illegal miners openly within the Senate, within Congress, trying to make laws and unable to move forward.
Citizens need to be aware of what illegal mining is, right? We've already experienced an attack this week in a city as busy as Trujillo, although before we saw these as isolated incidents tied to areas.
It's terrorism.
It's terrorism. Exactly, Jorge. And it's concerning that the government's inaction has not presented any strategic plan for a direct fight over all these months. There is talk about machinery being burned, etc. But there is no direct fight against illegal mining, and this can continue to progress and could be very, very, very dangerous in the run-up to the 2026 elections.
That's right. And Alberto Farfán was telling us about fieldwork, which is related to the same issue. In other words, fieldwork means the government being present by raising awareness and helping those who want to legalize, but with proposals that are, well, decent, right? So that people want to legalize what needs to be legalized. Sorry. So, we believe that the mining sector needs to be cautious. A rather challenging period is approaching. Politically complicated regarding where the resources come from. Let's see if the National Jury of Elections, the OMP, will really oversee where the resources come from for the 40 parties that will run for the presidency, the Senate, and the Congress. Let's see what happens, but we hope the government is vigilant, the new president of the National Jury of Elections, and that penalties are actually imposed in a timely manner, because it is useless to penalize someone when they are already the president of the republic. That doesn't work. It has to be at the moment, right? Well, thank you very much for being with us. We continue fighting from Rumbo Minero, and next, don't leave us because Peru is coming in just a few minutes right today. Thank you very much.